In our headlines on this Friday afternoon, January 19th. South Korea partakes in its first closed-door session of the United Nations Security Council for this year to address concerns over North Korea's hostile weapons ambitions and related collaboration with Russia. Over in the Middle East, US forces are maintaining their counteroffensive against land-based Houthi targets in Yemen as the rebel group maintains its rampant assaults against commercial ships in regional waters. Back here in Korea, the 2024 Winter Youth Olympics kick off in Gangwon-do province later on this Friday evening with an opening ceremony to welcome over 1,800 participants from more than 70 nations. We start in New York, where members of the UN Security Council met behind closed doors on Thursday to address mounting security concerns on the Korean peninsula. Our Choi Soo-hyung starts us off.
The United Nations Security Council met in New York on Thursday local time to discuss North Korean threats in the new year. This comes as South Korea, a non-permanent member of the Council, has requested international cooperation against the North security threats. Other countries such as the US and Japan also requested the meeting, which focused on North Korea and non-proliferation. In the meeting, the members discussed the regime's recent threat to Seoul and the international community, as well as the North Korea's launch on Sunday of an intermediate-range ballistic missile. South Korea emphasized that the North nuclear policy has changed in the last 2 or 3 years, so the Security Council should react not only by focusing on ballistic missiles launched by North Korea, but rather all types of security threats that harm international peace and safety. After the meeting, South Korea's UN ambassador Hwang Jung-guk said in-depth discussions took place. South Korea and the US urged the Security Council to break its silence, mentioning that Kim Jong-un, the leader of the regime, had declared a hostile relationship between Seoul and Pyongyang. However, experts say it may be challenging to reach an agreement on North Korean matters due to the current Security Council divisions. Choi Soo-hyung, Arirang News.
And here in Seoul, also on Thursday, nuclear delegates representing South Korea, Japan and the US sat down for trilateral talks to condemn North Korea's most recent ballistic missile testing and its hostile rhetoric. Our foreign affairs correspondent Peun-ji reports.
The nuclear envoys of South Korea, the US and Japan met in Seoul to discuss issues on North Korea amid heightened tensions in the region. Seoul's nuclear envoy Kim Gun said Pyongyang's version of a closed-door policy will only hurt itself and called on the regime to return to talks.
We call on North Korea to immediately stop provocations, lift its self-imposed ban on talks, and come back to the path of denuclearization, peace, and prosperity.
His remarks come as North Korea fired an intermediate-range ballistic missile on Sunday, which could be capable of targeting U.S. military bases in Guam or Japan. The North later claimed that this was a successful test launch of its solid-fuel missile carrying a hypersonic warhead. During the trilateral talks on Thursday, the U.S. nuclear envoy also criticized the North for unnecessarily raising tensions.
The United States is also deeply concerned by the recent uptick in hostile rhetoric, particularly toward the Republic of Korea, from the DPRK regime. Such rhetoric is unnecessarily increasing tensions on the Korean peninsula.
Thursday's meeting was just a day after the North Foreign Minister Choi Sun-hee visited Moscow, where she met Russian President Vladimir Putin and discussed enhancing bilateral relations in all areas, including what Russia called sensitive ones, which could mean military cooperation.
The transfer of these weapons and related material flagrantly violate the multiple UNSC resolutions and supports Russia's war of aggression. We also need to closely monitor what Russia might provide to North Korea in return for these arms exports.
The U.S. and its allies have accused Russia of using North Korean missiles in its war on Ukraine. And officials from Seoul and Washington have said North Korea is supplying munitions to Russia for use in its war against Ukraine in return for satellite technology. Peun-ji, Arirang News.
And a senior U.S. official believes military cooperation between North Korea and Russia will, quote, drastically raise regional security risks posed by Pyongyang over the next 10 years. Now, this is according to Senior Director Pranay Vadi of the White House National Security Council during a panel session hosted by the Center for Strategic and International Studies back on Thursday, during which he also shared concern over the, quote, unprecedented level of military cooperation between the two countries. Separately, in a press briefing after a NATO military committee meeting in Brussels on Thursday, the committee's chair, Dutch Admiral Rob Bauer, forecast that Russia will remain a threat even if it loses its war in Ukraine as its ambitions persist. Also on the international front, U.S. President Joe Biden has pledged that Washington's counteroffensive against Houthi targets in Yemen will remain in place as the rebel group maintains its rampant assaults against commercial vessels in regional waters. Our Isingje has the latest.
U.S. President Joe Biden said Thursday that a U.S. offensive against the Houthis will continue, as he noted that the Yemeni rebel group has not stopped their attacks against commercial ships in the Red Sea. The comments come as the U.S. conducted a fifth round of strikes on Yemen on Thursday after a U.S. ship was attacked by a Houthi drone. Washington says the string of attacks against the rebel group were defensive in nature and that it does not seek war. Amid growing conflict between Iran and Pakistan, the White House says the U.S. does not want to see an escalation in clashes between the two countries. White House National Security Council spokesman John Kirby said Thursday that it does not want to see an escalation in South and Central Asia, adding that the U.S. has been in touch with Pakistan. The conflict began when Iran conducted strikes against militant groups in Pakistan's Balochistan province, which resulted in the deaths of 2 children and injuries to several more people. Pakistan responded with attacks of their own. Over in Israel, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu rejected U.S. calls to scale back Israel's military offensive in the Gaza Strip. The Prime Minister on Thursday also stressed that Israel categorically opposes the establishment of a Palestinian state after the war. The comment drew ire from Washington, who said the two allies are not on the same page regarding Gaza issues. Meanwhile, the European Parliament called for a permanent ceasefire in Gaza, but added that it must be conditional on Hamas releasing the hostages it took in the October 7th attacks, as well as the full demilitarization of Gaza. Responding to the passage of the vote, Israel's ambassador to the EU said Israel is happy to see that the European Parliament understands the need to release the hostages and disarm Hamas before any ceasefire. Isingje, Arirang News.
Staying in the Middle East, up next we share with you the thoughts of a pundit here in the country regarding prospects of a wider regional conflict there. Our Iani reports.
The hostilities in the Middle East have intensified as Iran and the so-called Axis of Resistance, Iran's proxy group Houthis, continue attacks on Israeli forces and their allies. These indirect confrontations, however, do not seem to be merely in retaliation to Israel's bombardment of Gaza. Then what could be their possible intention?
Iran certainly has a strategic benefit in this attack in IL perspective, because Iran's allies and aligned country has a benefit, such as, for example, the China, who originate much of this missile technology, certainly enjoy to see U.S. and their ally naval resources tied up in the Red Sea.
Among the countries that could benefit from the situation is Russia, as Washington's attention could be diverted from Moscow's conflict with Ukraine.
So if we could see a bigger picture, they could enhance the alliances with anti-American countries.
Professor Peg also offers a second possible trajectory. Iran is trying to harm Israel and threaten Saudi Arabia by disrupting international shipping that go through the Gulf of Aden.
Saudi Arabia, you were kind of keep pushing our the resistance of access, Yemen, Houthis, and you're trying to get close with Israel.
In other words, Iran is trying to show Saudi Arabia that it has the capability and leverage to inflict harm on some of its key projects, including Vision 2030 and Neom City, which are concentrated on the Red Sea. If the bargaining power of Iran gets bigger, so does that of the Houthis. That's because Houthis align with Iran, although they are not considered one entity that obeys orders from Iran. Professor Beck, as a political scientist, does not see many incentives for Iran and the axis of resistance, including Houthis and Hezbollah, to continue war against Israel. However, the possibility of a fifth Middle East war happening could rise if Israel invades Lebanon or Yemen. Lee Eun-hee, Arirang News.
Seoul's Trade Ministry is seeking a bold new strategy in future R&D funding by opting for greater risk to allow for greater return. Our Moon Hae-ryun has details.
Funding for industry research and development will now be centered around high-risk, high-return projects, as well as fostering future talent. The Ministry of Trade, Industry and Energy held a roundtable session on Thursday to announce how it would spend its portion of the 2024 R&D budget, which is around a fifth of the country's total R&D budget. 70% will be allocated to provide support in 11 key sectors, such as the semiconductor industry, which has recently begun to show signs of recovery. This equates to around 1.3 trillion Korean won, or just under $970 million for the government, but a total of 2 trillion won of public and private funding will be given to 40 projects in these sectors this year. Continuing with the overarching theme of concentrating efforts towards select projects, the government will also increase support to develop what it has dubbed game-changer technology. To do this, the Industry Ministry has pledged to set aside 10% of its annual budget to support high-risk projects to solve industry issues. In addition, it aims to reduce small-scale projects and focus instead on those on a larger scale to maximize market performance, and to do this, it will be expanding the number of projects worth more than 10 billion won from 57 last year to 160 projects this year, by combining those with similar research goals. A new methodology to assign research and development projects will be implemented this year to give companies and researchers a more active role. The government will present goals that need to be achieved, and companies and researchers can lead the project planning process, where they can form a consortium and allocate research funds among themselves. Another key area in which funding will be raised is nurturing future talent, by increasing the number of graduate school programs in new industry areas, such as chips, batteries and displays, from the current 3 to 11 this year. Moon Hae-ryun, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, Seoul, Tokyo and Washington have welcomed intentions by their national laboratories to cooperate in the field of quantum technology. The heads of Seoul National University, the University of Chicago and the University of Tokyo met in Davos on Thursday and penned a letter of intent to launch a trilateral partnership on academic endeavors. In a joint statement following this accord, National Security Advisors Chang Ho-jin, Jake Sullivan and Takeo Akiba claimed the partnership will serve to strengthen collective competitiveness in the global economy. Following their Camp David summit last August, South Korea, Japan and the US have sought trilateral scientific initiatives and sealed a related deal in December. Also in Davos, artificial intelligence was on the agenda of the World Economic Forum also on Thursday. Now, talks centered on the rewards and risks of AI adoption. Attending as a panelist, OpenAI CEO Sam Altman claimed AI can tackle tasks promptly and precisely, but that we need to understand AI can make mistakes. Now, this year's AI discussion also explored ethical concerns as artificial intelligence takes on greater decision-making roles in diverse industries, highlighting the need for appropriate regulations. In other news, tackling Korea's dismal birth rate is a common political agenda. That being said, both the country's ruling and opposition parties on Thursday made public their respective plans to this end, and our National Assembly correspondent Issue covers their proposals.
With just a little over 80 days left until South Korea's 22nd general election, the parties each announced on Thursday a new set of pledges aiming for a common goal: to save the country with the lowest birth rate in the world since 2013 from its declining population. The ruling People Power Party says its main goal is to bridge the gaps across families with varying incomes and working environments.
This low birth rate issue is related to the gap when it comes to the burden of raising a child and the gap between working at large corporations and small businesses. We think that bridging these gaps is the first step toward solving the low birth rate issue and building a society of co-prosperity.
The party plans to make a month-long paid paternity leave mandatory and amend laws to guarantee childcare leave upon request. Furthermore, they will increase the maximum monthly childcare leave payment of 1.5 million Korean won, or around $1,100 to 2.1 million Korean won, around $1,600 to match the minimum wage. Small businesses will be given additional incentives for implementing childcare leave. And by 2025, there will be more support for those not covered by national employment insurance, such as independent artists and farmers. The main opposition Democratic Party, meanwhile, is putting the emphasis on providing financial and housing support.
The state will directly support the formation of basic assets for all newlyweds. We will further strengthen the nation's responsibility for childbirth and care and come up with groundbreaking measures to deal with the housing problem.
The party will offer public rental housing for parents of 2 or more children. It will also give out no-interest loans of up to 100 million Korean won, around $75,000 for newlyweds with a child, and a 50% reduction of the principal upon the birth of a second child. The birth of a third child would grant a 100% repayment exemption. Monthly cash vouchers will be given to parents of school-aged children worth around 200,000 Korean won, or around $150. Plus, there will be more childcare support for single and unmarried parents. Both parties aim to establish a new ministry focused on the declining population problem. In response to the proposal, Sung Tae-yoon, the director of the Presidential National Policy Office, agreed that revolutionary policies were needed in terms of social infrastructure and the economy to deal with this issue appropriately. Lee Si-hoo, Arirang News.
The number of vehicles driven by fossil fuels here in Korea dropped last year for the first time since data collection began in the year 1999. According to Seoul's Transport Ministry on this Friday, the number of diesel, petroleum and LPG vehicles dropped by 0.5% on year to stand at 23.6 million. Now, officials are linking this finding to the popularity of eco-friendly cars, with the number of electric vehicles rising nearly 40% on year and hybrid vehicles by 32%. In sports news, later on this Friday evening over in Gangwon-do province, an opening ceremony to kick off the 2024 Winter Youth Olympics takes place. Our Ian Jin reports.
The 4th edition of the Winter Youth Olympics will open in eastern South Korea's Gangwon-do province on Friday evening at 8 p.m. This is the first time that the quadrennial youth winter sports event is taking place in an Asian country, as it was previously hosted by Austria, Norway, and Switzerland. It's also the largest Winter Youth Olympics ever, with 1,803 athletes representing 79 different countries, competing in 81 events across 7 sports and 15 disciplines. South Korea, as the host, will have the largest delegation of 102 participating athletes. Welcoming young athletes from around the world between the ages of 15 and 18, the opening ceremony will take place at 2 venues, the Gangneung Oval and the Pyeongchang Dome. Several venues used during the 2018 Pyeongchang Winter Olympics will be used again. All ice events, short track and curling will take place in Gangneung, while all sliding events, cross-country skiing and the biathlon will be held in Pyeongchang. The nearby town of Jeongseon will hold alpine skiing and moguls in freestyle skiing, and the county of Hwangsong will stage snowboarding and 4 freestyle skiing events, slopestyle, halfpipe, ski cross, and big air. With a greater focus on friendship and education through sport, medals are being awarded to the top 3 finishers, but there will be no official medal count by the International Olympics Committee. 5 nations, Algeria, Nigeria, Puerto Rico, Tunisia, and the United Arab Emirates, will be making their Winter Youth Olympics debut. The event will run until February 1st. Ian Jin, Arirang News.
On the entertainment front, Germany-born Korean actor Yoo Tae-ho has been nominated for leading actor at the 2024 British Film Awards. The nomination highlights his role in the film Past Lives, written and directed by Celine Song, a Korean-Canadian director. It shares the story of two childhood sweethearts who reconnect years later. The film has also been nominated for the Best Foreign Language Screen Production and Best Original Screenplay. Now, this year's British Film Awards will be held on February 18th in London.
Let's take a look at the latest news in the world now. In Singapore, the country's former Minister for Transport, S. Iswaran, was charged with corruption on Thursday. Iswaran had been arrested last July, but remained as minister until his resignation on Tuesday. In the city-state that prides itself with having a clean government, he would have been the country's first sitting minister to be charged with a criminal offence. Singapore's anti-graft agency, the Corrupt Practices Investigation Bureau, said that Iswaran faces 27 charges for allegedly obtaining kickbacks worth almost $290,000 from Malaysian property tycoon Ong Beng Seng in exchange for advancing Ong's business interests such as the Formula One's Singapore Grand Prix. Iswaran allegedly accepted bribes including flights on Ong's private plane, luxury hotel stays, and tickets to musicals and sports events. He denies all charges. If convicted, Iswaran faces fines of up to $75,000 or up to 7 years in prison. In Japan, the country's defense ministry signed a deal with the US on Thursday to purchase up to 400 Tomahawk cruise missiles amid growing threats from China. Defense Minister Kihara Minoru and US Ambassador Rahm Emanuel oversaw the signing of the contract in Tokyo for the multi-billion-dollar deal. The purchase follows Prime Minister Fumio Kishida's adoption of a new security strategy in December 2022, where he pledged to double annual defense spending to around $68 billion through 2027. If executed, this would make Japan the world's third largest military spender after the US and China. Japan plans to complete the deployment of the Tomahawk missiles by 2027. In the United Kingdom, lawmakers on Wednesday voted in favour of Prime Minister Rishi Sunak's bill to send asylum seekers to Rwanda. The PM managed to overcome rebellion from Conservative Party members, which hindered previous efforts to pass the bill, with the legislation passing 320 to 276. The bill had been heavily scrutinised over fears of human rights breaches, but with immigration a crucial issue for Britain, Sunak has made stopping asylum seekers arriving in small boats a priority for his government. Under the plan, migrants who illegally arrive in the UK will be sent some 6,400 kilometres away to Rwanda to have their asylum claims processed. The bill is yet to be approved by the House of Lords. In the US, New York City and eastern states are expecting further snowfall on Friday as an Arctic air mass brings cold temperatures into the weekend. The National Weather Service reported potential snowfall across the region starting on Friday of between 2.5 and 13 centimeters. In New York City, where earlier this week a 701-day drought of measurable snow was broken with 4 to 5 centimeters of snow on Tuesday, heavy snowfall of up to 8 centimeters may be seen. New York City's Emergency Management Department has issued a travel advisory for Friday. Kim Xiang, Arirang News.
Good afternoon. The warming trend should continue today in most places and into the weekend with snow in the forecast for the east of Gangwon-do province. Until tomorrow, mountainous regions in Gangwon-do could see more than 30 centimeters of snowfall with a heavy snow advisory issued there. Those in East Coast regions need to brace for heavy snow through the weekend. Speaking of Gangwon-do, where the Winter Youth Olympic Games will take place for the next 2 weeks, the weather today looks to be a snowy one for Pyeongchang and Gangneung, and it will be freezing cold all day in Pyeongchang, so have a thicker jacket on. Much of the country are having highs that are warmer than norms with good air quality nationwide, but it will be rather cloudy all day in many places. As tomorrow marks Taehan, a period of major cold in the seasonal calendar, the weather will follow the term next week. It's going to be one freezing week. That's Korea for you, and here's a look at the international weather conditions.
That ends our Friday afternoon newscast. Coming up right after this break is our daily panel session, so do stay with us. Thank you for now.